Martin Atkins' fierce drumming was an integral part of such bands as Public Image Limited, Killing Joke, Ministry, and Pigface. His entrepreneurial spirit is a constant source of inspiration and guidance for musicians and artists. Since founding Invisible Records in 1988, his label has released over 350 albums. In 1996, he opened the Mattress Factory Studios in Chicago. Martin's also a sought-out lecturer and educator, having authored Tour Smart and Break the Band, which has become the Bible for the professional working musician. Welcome to the program, Martin Atkins.
Hey, thanks for that introduction. That was really nice.
The first time I heard your playing, when I was aware of it, was Flowers of Romance, which I've often described to people the soundtrack to insanity. Yes.
That was, well, first off, that was a long time ago. What was that, 1981. And I wish I'd known then how lucky I was. We would experiment with different sounds, and those drums were recorded in the same studio that Phil Collins recorded In the Air Tonight. That big, huge drum sound.
Right.
And we were just in there messing around. I put my Mickey Mouse watch on a floor tom-tom, and Nick Launay, the engineer then, who went on to become producer of the year and worked with In Excess, and he's still working in L.A. now, put that sound through different effects, and then I played drums to that, and then John sang over that. I mean, we were just playing around in the sandpit. It was just glorious time. And I think very lucky that our experiments were underpinned by Johnny Rotten's success with the Sex Pistols,
Right.
We didn't really talk about it at the time, but if we'd just been experimenting in the studio, I don't think we would have been financially allowed to do what we were doing. It was because we were built on the backs of John's success with the Sex Pistols that we were allowed to go off on a tangent, and I'm very grateful for that period of time.
Oh yeah, and the records that you played on up and even through today, and the music you're always drawn to exciting music. What makes you choose a piece or a band to join, or what kind of draws you to play with other people? What are some of the characteristics that they share?
Well, I think over anything else, it needs to excite me, and it doesn't have to excite me musically. Just the situation has to excite me or intrigue me or challenge me. I put a band called Murder Inc. together, and it was myself on drums with the original drummer in Killing Joke, Paul Ferguson.
Right.
And socially, that was a challenge. I mean, the drumming stuff was just a joy, hands down. But to be in a band, to put myself in a band with the previous drummer from Killing Joke, who I replaced, was just kind of nuts. But it kind of adrenalized the musical situation,
Right. Right. And when you look at Killing Joke, there's a band that has continued to evolve and continued to challenge themselves. And Jazz Coleman, I would love to have been a fly on the wall and heard some of the conversations between the two of you, because you were not only in the band, you served as their manager, correct?
Yeah, it was. I think that was the point at which, I had Invisible Records, and, Killing Joke were kind of not viable when I joined them. They just released probably their worst album called Outside the Gate, which to the old school guys amongst us, it was an exploration of MIDI keyboards gone mad.
Right.
I mean, it probably shouldn't have been released, and I was so excited to go to England and join the band. And then my wife at the time said, "Have you heard Outside the Gate?" I'm like, "No." And I nearly didn't get on the plane. The business affairs were just a nightmare. And, for some reason I said, look, I'm not joining the band that made Outside the Gate because I wasn't in that band. I'm going to go and join the band with me in it.
Right.
And then, I just needed to start to help with some of the managerial stuff, the budgeting. I persuaded the band to take a short break during the recording of Extremities, and we played a show in Poland and one in Geneva. But really, the logistics of us doing that really enabled us to afford to record that album. And then I set about bringing the band to the States, because they really didn't want to come to the States. So I built a rehearsal room and set up a situation that made it easy for the band to be here and grow and succeed. So it was a big turning point for me, I think. But yeah, some of those conversations with Jazz Coleman, perhaps you maybe it's better that you weren't a fly on the wall. I mean, one of the sad things I think for me is that even with the best of intentions, when you remove yourself from the from just being a member of the band, and you start to do business stuff to help the band that enables better recording and a more comfortable touring situation, you nevertheless remove yourself from that core unit.
Mm-hmm.
And I think whatever benefits I brought to the band came at a great sacrifice to me and my situation within the band.
That's an interesting point you bring up. And, art is a consuming passion for you. Music is obviously your calling, but you're an astute businessman. Now, did that business sense become honed as a survival instinct?
Well, I think that I got involved in business because I saw bad business affect the effective delivery of the artistic and musical things I was involved in. So the easy way to describe that is if the promoter didn't do an okay basic nuts and bolts job of promoting a show and didn't sell many advance tickets, invariably the first thing that promoter would do would be to downsize the sound system. So, and that's just immediately obvious to you when you're playing in a room. If the sound system isn't the right size for the room, it's a bummer for everybody.
Right.
And so slightly better business gets a much better sound system. So I think there's so many ways in which taking care of business enhances the artistic experience. But, I think I found over the course of my however many years doing it, there's been some sacrifices as well in a more intimate, creative, perhaps, situation with the band members themselves. I mean, I put the band Pigface, that's my band,
Right.
But it's not always possible to be a member of the band and the employer of everybody.
Mm-hmm.
It changes things. Sometimes subtly, sometimes not so subtly.
Right. And you've often had to deal with over-the-top personalities. I mean, working with Al Jorgensen in Ministry at the peak of their popularity and height of their explosion onto the scene, that couldn't have been an easy gig.
Well, no, except that, Ministry wasn't my responsibility. I was just playing drums in Ministry, so in some ways that was kind of a holiday for me.
Yeah.
In many other ways, it was a torturous nightmare, But I think, I'm 52 years old now,
right.
And it's easy to say, if I'm talking to kids in a management class, it's easy to say, be careful, maybe you think you want to manage somebody that's clean, tidy, punctual, and has their shit together.
Right.
But for so many other reasons, you might want to actually be managing someone who's a complete lunatic, who's difficult, who has no sense of or respect for anybody else other than this mission that they're on, you know. And I think that's true. Excuse me. That's true of John Lydon, not all the time, but some of the time. It's certainly true of Jazz Coleman and the members of Killing Joke and Al Jorgensen and many of the people who I've been lucky enough to perform with.
Right.
You know, so it's certainly changed. It's as I've gotten older, I think I've been more. You'd expect me to be less tolerant of assholes. But I think I have more of a respect now for that holy grail of real charisma, not fake charisma. You know, so many managers throw that term around, like every every nightclub singer has charisma. Well, the fact is they don't, and charisma is a really special, magical thing. And I think that I'd be willing to make more sacrifices and compromises with myself to spend more time around that in the future than perhaps I thought I would have years ago.
You know, I think you may have a title for your next album, Respect for Assholes.
Yeah. Well, if I ever make another album, you know, I think over the last couple of years that creative side of me has diminished a little bit. I made an album that I really loved when I was in China in 2007 called Made in China.
Yeah.
And I called the project China Dub Sound System.
Great
I really loved doing that. But that's 2007. That's a while ago.
Yeah, well, we're waiting. And that album is one of those records, every time you listen to it, it reveals something else. That's a headphones album, I think.
Oh, well, thanks. You know, I loved mixing that. And that's like an extended 3D postcard to myself because, you know, I was there, and that's kind of a, glorious postcard back to myself from that trip.
Right. We're talking with Martin Atkins on the phone with us today. We're talking about music, the business of being an artist. You know, you talked about the different personalities that you dealt with in different aspects of your career. And let's talk about the road itself is a strange animal. The touring musicians that I know, it's a whole different world. It's a world where decadence and excess is very commonplace. And what advice do you have for maybe someone heading out on their first tour? Because there's a lot of pitfalls, you know, the partying lifestyle.
Well, you know, honestly, these days, you just can't do that anymore. You know, I think that whereas in the past, and believe me, I've done it, you know, people coming on a bus with huge plastic bags full of chocolate mescaline, you know, I mean, I've done it, you know, at many different levels in different bands in different countries. And the fact is now, whereas we used to have 4, 5, 6, 10 cases of beer just to start with on the rider, what you see now by bands who continue to do this is the same number of cases. It's just water instead of beer. I mean, the amount of work that you have to do simply to sustain on the road.
Right.
You know, you're up at, you know, it's 5 a.m. and you need to do a radio interview with a guy from a radio station in Norway, because that's where you're going to be 2 months from now, you know, and it just begins. And then you want to meet the people, your local street team kids who've helped you in Denver or San Diego or Syracuse, New York, because they've put in the man hours and the legwork to make sure people know you're coming. You want to have a cup of coffee with them and spend some time with them. And you want to be available to your fans early. You want to do a couple of interviews in town, and maybe you've done a special VIP pass where 30 of your fans can come and hang out for sound check. You know, and then you go and do an in-store appearance. If you're lucky enough to be invited to do that because you want a local store or a radio station or somewhere to do an email blast about your show to help you sell tickets. And then maybe one of the members of your band has been invited to DJ at an after-hours show, and that venue have also done an email blast to their extensive mailing list to let people know about the after-show party and the show itself. And the touring day now is a 36-hour day, whereas it used to be, doors open at 8, on stage at 10, and then party. It's a 36-hour day, and, you get drunk on a Tuesday, you're not going to recover till the end of the tour.
Right.
Right. And there's just too much at stake to have a guitarist cut his hand or have somebody miss the bus because they're wandering around in circles drunk.
Right.
Or lowering their threshold to airborne viruses or platform boot-born idiots. You just can't afford to risk anything these days on the road.
You're right. It's become more of a grassroots effort now more than ever.
Right, and I think that the really smart people doing it, like you see people like Amanda Palmer, and many bands at a very, very grassroots level, they're looking to fans as people they can stay with, But when you save the hotel costs, you increase the personal psychic costs, then now you're a guest in somebody's home and you have to be nice to them because I think, hopefully you'd want to be anyway.
Right.
But you also have to, you're in somebody's home, so maybe you need to sit up and listen to some of their favorite music or watch their favorite TV show or look at their artwork or
yeah, right.
Stroke their cat or look at their vegetable garden or check out their in-home studio. And you've just lost another hour or two, but you've gained another friend. You just can't do that if you're looking for that mythical, old-style, decadent road experience,
Yeah. It's not available anymore. It's too hard,
right.
Like you're saying. As a drummer, do you hit the skins anymore? Do you woodshed, or are you too busy lecturing and?
Well, I have been doing a lot of lecturing recently, traveling a lot, and it's strange. It's more exhausting for me than drumming.
Oh.
Drumming is a different experience for me. It kind of centers me. But I was in a car accident in February of this year, and it really messed my back up. I've had a couple of procedures. I'm starting to work out to strengthen my core, and I think I'm hoping by January I can start to noodle around on the drums again and start to get fit and get my drumming brain back on, But it's been a while.
Well, it exists in and of itself. Your drumming, as a drummer, I can hear all sorts of motifs in your playing, and there's a lot of tribal pulses. There's a touch of Keith Moon. I hear some John Bonham influence. These are just things I'm picking up, and then it's all wholly your own because you've always drummed with such a fierce intensity that your playing is unmistakable.
Well, thank you. I mean, that's fairly heavy stuff. You just laid on me there, and those are drummers that I listen to. It was a very sad experience for me to read the Keith Moon story.
Yeah.
And I just bought a snare drum that anecdotally was used by Keith Moon. I don't have any documentation to back it up, but I was happy to pay slightly over the odds for the drum, just on the off chance that it actually was used by Keith.
Right.
And I think that I love watching Keith Moon play because it's like, there was always a price to pay. Maybe he wasn't always totally on it, but he was in a visual sense.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I decided at one point, screw it. If people want to hear me drumming accurately, go and buy one of my albums. But if you come out and see me play, then I'm going to pour water all over my drums and kick the drums all over the stage, and and have some fun visually with it.
Right.
You know, it's probably going to mess the sound up, but we're going to have some fun.
What were some of your earliest exposures to music, and when did you decide to head down the path of being a professional?
Well, the first stuff I listened to, one album that I remember, my dad inherited a collection, and one of the albums was Buddy Rich versus Gene Krupa
Oh,
called
sure.
Burning Beat. And those two drummers would kind of trade off, to kind of question and answer each other, and then they'd play in unison and go off, you know. And then I guess I saw the Gary Glitter band. They used two drummers, you know. So this whole two-drummer thing was kind of in my mind there. And we've done that a lot with Pigface and Murder Inc., as I said. I listened to the Beatles and Led Zeppelin and the sensational Alex Harvey band, all kinds of different stuff. And then, so I was all about the glorification of technique from when I was 9 till I was 16. And then I got into punk rock and said, screw it. But it was kind of a convenient time for me to say screw it after I'd spent 6 or 7 years practicing for 4 hours a day, you know?
Right. If I were to try to put together your itinerary for a day with all that you're involved in and all that you're doing, what's a typical day for Martin Atkins?
Well, I think one of the luckiest, you know, I'm not sure I believe in luck. I think you make your own luck.
Right.
But one of the things that makes me the most happy is that what you just asked me just changed. I just had coffee with a marketing guy, and I have no idea how we even agreed to have coffee. But it was brain-tingling ping pong. I'm driving up to Madison Media Institute now, and I'm going to drop in and see some students this evening, and then I'm in class tomorrow and Thursday. Sometimes I go off and do lectures. I create new lectures on subjects that interest me and kind of road test them, and maybe that becomes material for a new book. I'm working on a new book, so sometimes I'm interviewing people for that. Sometimes I'm reading and just surfing and trying to formulate ideas and ways of communicating those ideas to people like me who are ADD or you know, I just don't want to read 700 pages. I need pictures and I need ideas to help me get it.
Right.
You know, I'm messing around with shooting video, working with at-risk high school kids, or messing around with my own kids.
Right.
You know, next Tuesday, the 13th, we're doing an Xbox controller modification workshop. And I just love that class. One of my friends, Bill, is coming in to teach the class, and I do a lecture beforehand, and then we hook people up with these modded controllers. So I think I'm very fortunate that I've done so much more than drum.
Right. Oh yeah.
And that would be some advice. Not that you're asking me for any advice, but anybody who thinks they want to be a drummer or a guitarist or whatever is to not do one thing.
Right.
You know, my granddad used to say, "Jack of all trades, master of none." You know, the old school idea was to only do one thing. But now, I think you need to try and do a few things.
Yeah.
It makes you a more interesting person, and it means that it opens up so many more possibilities to play drums.